I'll start us off. Thank you all for joining in on this session. Our session is relevant for all vendor managers, third-party risk managers, sourcing managers, interested in gaining insight into our recent advances in AI and the impact on the respective functions. Sorry, I'm Ruhi, and I'm a product marketing manager in the technology space. Our panelists are industry veterans representing a client perspective, an industry advisor perspective, and a technology perspective. And with all the buzz around AI, this should be a great discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all attendees to put their questions in the chat. We'll have a chance to answer the questions at the end of the session, but let's get right into it. And I'll introduce the panelists. So on the call, we have Mark VOYTEK. He's the founder of VOYTECHNOLOGY Partners. He's an ex-EY Global Business Transformation Lead and currently in the IAOP Leadership Hall of Fame. Nice to meet you, Mark. MN Rao is Director of IT Vendor Management at NESTLE and previously Senior Director Technology Vendor Management at Equifax. Nice to have you on the call, MN Rao. NIPUN SEHGAL is the President and CEO at ENLIGHTA, that is a TPRM risk and vendor governance SaaS solutions lead. Thank you for joining. So the latest buzzword is generative AI. If you all could, what is generative AI and how is it different from other forms of AI?
Thanks, Ruhi, first of all, and great to have this panel with you all. So generative AI is basically it's just an evolution of AI where there's a lot of content that has been used to train the AI systems, and it is very good at predicting what comes next. And of course, it works well with text, with images, with video, and the application of generative AI is what makes it so exciting for vendor management and TPRM, that there's a lot of unstructured content that these functions deal with. And generative AI can not only produce content, but also help analyze a lot of unstructured content. In other kinds of AIs also are relevant. So we have the traditional AI systems, which are based on patterns and rules, and those also play a role in this evolution. So that's a little bit about generative AI. And of course, everyone's probably tried ChatGPT and maybe early the beta version of Bard, and you can probably see for yourself the power of these tools.
Emin, what are the areas of vendor management that will benefit most from the recent advances in AI?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Ruhi. And I'm very happy to be on this panel. With its simple interface and text input, ChatGPT shows how AI is now ready for business. It is so convenient to interact and ready to be leveraged by people without a technical background. One thing to note about ChatGPT is that it is not that it is generative, though of course the outputs provide value, but it is super easy to use. It is simple and human-centered, not machine-centered. I believe vendor management functions like compliance and risk management, performance, governance, relationship, and financial management could directly benefit from this kind of easy-to-use AI that can not only consume, understand, and analyze both data and information, but also enhance vendor managers' abilities in saving, negotiating, decision-making, and building relationships.
I mean, that's great. Mark, Nipun, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure, I'll go. Great to be here. Oftentimes when we think about vendor management, we think about outsourcing governance. And what I've seen in the market for the Global 2000 is an expansion of that concept to include captives. So now it's captives and outsourcing, and it's the ability to org, track, and report on those things that are important to proactively manage the relationship. Again, whether it's a supplier relationship or whether it's a captive in a service delivery location that may be delivering work. And so the thought is, if one captive is outperforming a supplier from a financial perspective, the financial management module within the governance tool you might have would be able to highlight that and you'd be able to move work from one location to another. Similarly, obligation management, you've got operating agreements with captives, the ability to, again, track those obligations and proactively address the fixes is something that needs to be managed proactively. And then lastly, performance management. If one location is outperforming another, or if the service provider is outperforming the captive, then yeah, let's move work there, or let's make sure that they address the SLAs and the KPIs from a performance management perspective. And again, do that holistically for global business services, as opposed to kind of the old days when it was either outsourcing or captives.
Great. The great point, Mark. And I'll just add a couple of points there, just from a technology perspective. We think it's a rich area for technology to make an impact in all of these functions. And I've got a simple slide which tries to depict that. So of course, we all know that typically clients go through selection and onboarding of suppliers, and then they go through risk assessment as part of the due diligence, and then they go through contract. Either they create contracts or they write SOWs, and then they eventually, on an ongoing basis, they manage the performance and compliance of those contracts, and of course governance and tracking of financials. Are you getting the value that you expected out of the relationships? Are the invoices correct? And so on. So that's the typical life cycle, and in almost every area of this life cycle, you can make AI could play a key role. And it's not just theoretical; it's something that actively, is happening. In tool providers such as ENLIGHTA have adapted their tool set to include AI in many of these areas. And I'll just mention a few. So, for example, suppliers are often interested in understanding, what the status of their invoices are. So all those queries, instead of offering forms, these could all be natural language interfaces, so that AI can create chatbots that enable suppliers to get that information. Similarly, there's a lot of external data that is available through APIs, through reports, analyst reports, through market data, and you could basically, in addition to what the suppliers have provided, you could enrich the data in the supplier portal through AI and through analysis of external content. On the flip side, right, clients often also have questions and queries from vendor management, and those queries can be answered in a natural language interface. I was just recently talking to one of our clients where they wanted to explore the use of our platform to capture vendor capabilities, right? But the interface they wanted for their business users was going to be a very natural interface. They wanted the ability for a client to say that, who are the top 5 suppliers in our network who in our ecosystem that can provide Salesforce expertise in Latin America, right? So that's, instead of it going, instead of figuring out navigating to some form or creating reports, really having a natural language interface so AI can play a key role there. And of course, it need not be just in English; it could be in multiple languages. Similarly, in addition to all what is tracked in SLAs and KPIs, there's often a lot of internal feedback that is captured, and that categorizing that feedback, or for that matter, even external feedback. There may be contact centers, and there may be SLAs against those, but then there may be a lot of external feedback chatter, and that to organize that. So I think that's an area which AI can play a role, and in risk assessment, we'll be talking a little bit more about this, but there are lots of areas in risk assessment where AI can help, and the same is true for extraction of data from contracts. So we will be talking a little bit more about these topics. But great question. Yeah.
Yeah, well, let's take one example from financial management, such as price benchmarking for cost optimization. And then how is AI likely to make an impact?
Excellent question. I think that this area drives maximum value out of using AI. A lot of enterprises, when I say enterprises, large ones, have hundreds of contracts with various commercial models. That is volume-based pricing, fixed pricing, capacity-based pricing, and hourly pricing, and then whatnot. Several different ways of input-based pricing, output-based pricing, lots of different ways to prepare a commercial model for a given engagement. And then it is challenging to understand the unit cost for a unit of work, given all this diversity and then lots of contracts. And then it is also difficult to understand the value received for the given price at a given location. Like what's the value coming from India versus US versus Mexico? And that's very, very difficult to assess. A human-centered AI can enhance the ability of vendor managers in understanding such costs and an ability to compare across competitive proposals and past contracts and benchmark, like Nipun was talking about, with some external data also, so that a meaningful insight can be provided to the vendor manager who is either in a negotiation situation or trying to analyze the cost for a strategic sourcing decision. So this enables the effective negotiations as well as some prescriptive capabilities, like how do I design a new engagement? Should I use more of this location versus the other location? Kind of thinking can come for vendor managers and even IT managers. That's how I see AI helping financially an organization.
I think in addition to what MN said, and I think you did clearly cover some of the areas, I think beyond that, and yes, it's about driving actions and insights. And so the use of benchmarking to align to the contract and the termination provisions, let's take termination for convenience as an example. That's usually in the Word document. There's a sliding scale of fees included in an exhibit that would take the termination fees on a monthly basis, a year-by-year basis, and reduce that. And then at some point, 2, 3, 4 years into an outsourcing contract, wouldn't it be great by taking external market data, running a comparison to what those sliding fees are in the termination for convenient fee schedule, aligned to the flexibility, and then the commercial client could then have a more informed discussion with their supplier and suggest that they want to either renegotiate, they want to recompete, or they want to do something different. So when we think about the use of AI, it's things that are embedded inside the contract themselves. It's the numbers included in the termination for fee exhibit. And then there's some external data that can be taken advantage of if we can really focus on driving insights and actions. That's one example that I've seen clients do this. It's getting easier to do it, but not everyone's doing it. And again, that's the proactive nature of strategic ecosystem management or vendor management in this case.
Well, monitoring of vendor performance using SLAs and KPIs is important to realize business value. Let's discuss the impact of performance management.
I think for that, and it's not just performance, it's supplier and overall relationship management. And when we talk about governance and we think about how we want to proactively manage our vendors or manage the captives in the discussion that we had a little bit earlier, you really want to do that with and I say manage with metrics. Oftentimes I see commercial clients and suppliers managing on emotion. And that's a recipe for not a great relationship between the client and the service provider. So what can be an unbiased service of record? ENLIGHTA as a platform has the ability to provide that unbiased service of record because it quantitatively looks at the financials, the performance, and can track the obligations in the contract clauses. In addition to that, I work with clients in an advisory capacity where we talk to them about what are you looking for? Are you looking to check the box for internal audit, and you're going to have performance management SLAs and KPIs? Or are you really looking to kind of do a combination of that and try to figure out how this captive or this outsourcing arrangement, this vendor arrangement, how you can make that better? And what I would suggest is you really want to focus on that second one, right? How do you make the relationship better? How do you drive better performance? How do you do whatever the delivery, whether it's back office, middle office, or even front office, how do you drive more efficiency and effectiveness? And one way to do that is with performance management. And then as we talked about, obviously AI is another lever to be able to take advantage of technology to do that.
Just to add to what Mark has talked about, I think he has covered most of the ground. Large enterprises with the multiple partners struggle to understand the performance, relationship, and value of the services from each partner across the company. One vendor may perform very well in some areas and not so well in others. AI could play a huge role around predictive and prescriptive insights around vendor performance and overall relationship. A 360-degree view of a partnership covering relationship, team integration, contracting, performance, and all moments of truth. I call this as a moment of truth. Any interaction between a client and a partner is a moment of truth that creates a perception. All moments of truth that should be included, and it will be helpful while selecting and working with a partner throughout the life cycle. The IT manager, for example, may decide to give a little more support or longer rope for a vendor to stabilize when it is known that this vendor is delivering value to many stakeholders for similar services across the company. So this is the information that is very relevant and useful for every one of us in this enterprise, whether it is IT manager or vendor manager.
Great point, Iman. I think the only thing I will probably add to that is, AI's power is dealing with lots of unstructured data, right, from different sources. And one of the things that some of our clients have been struggling with is that they find that the SLAs are all green, but the end users are not happy. So the CSAT surveys and the internal surveys don't reflect that everything is green. So where is the disconnect, right? So why is it that contractually the suppliers meeting their performance, but actually the people are not very happy? And then AI can really help categorize those. It can go through vast quantities of either, let's say it's a call center, a contact center, and there's data on all kinds of forums about their interaction with customer support, right? To analyze that and figure out, at what is it for flight cancellations? Is there a problem? Is it for, where is the problem, right? And AI is very good at that. AI is also very good at taking internal feedback, which could be all, text, or just, it could be in emails, it could be in any form, and then understanding that and classifying that so that people can take some meaningful action. So I think performance, the sentiment indicators would become part of the overall, scorecards for suppliers, in addition to the actual, fact-based indicators. So
beyond SLAs and KPIs, clients are using or would like to use scorecards for key and strategic vendors. So how do you envision scorecards evolving?
Shall I start, Ruhi?
Yeah, sure. Emma, go ahead.
Scorecards enhanced by generative AI could provide a comprehensive view of vendor relationships across the enterprise. Like Mark and NIPUN were talking about, they could be, as I'm visioning this into the future as we use generative AI in this area, they could be dynamic in terms of appearance and content, as well as contain up to the minute information, because it's not a stale or past information that we're talking about. Scorecards include quantitative aspects like SLAs and KPIs, alongside qualitative aspects like sentiment analysis, views, perceptions, strengths, like what Nipun was talking about, and opportunities in the relationship. Where are the gaps? The ability to slice and dice already existing what will be interesting is to have interactive and specific insight that are relevant to the situation. I'm the IT manager, I'm asking for a specific thing. And then go to the whole world, get to know what is happening in the world, and then tell me what what is it about, right? So that is very, very useful. I'm hoping these bots will be very objective in providing the views and inferences from all this data. And then they make our lives better. And then, like I kept on saying, this generative AI, I'm more excited because they're going to be more human enabling, human centered bots that I'm expecting, which means a vendor manager may become super vendor manager because this all of a sudden became more intelligent suddenly, you know. So that's what I'm expecting. That's core question.
Super vendor managers. That sounds very interesting. Yeah, and the only thing I'll add, Emin, is I guess in addition to the sentiment analysis as part of the scorecard, also we have seen that some of the clients are including ESG KPIs. So they're looking at suppliers holistically, and especially those in manufacturing and other industries where they are required to, produce their own ESG metrics and publish them. They are looking at their supply chain and saying, okay, how are my suppliers performing? And they are integrating those. And the ESG metrics are interesting because it's a combination of what the sub suppliers and their subcontractors are informing, along with a lot of market data that you can analyze, right? If there was a chemical spill, if there was some fine from some regulatory authority, all of that will go into the ESG metrics. So anyway, that's kind of what we're seeing, right?
So then, using AI, how will risk management change with respect to vendors and third parties? I mean, I might toss this back to you.
Thank you. See, one of the key challenges is securely extending generative AI beyond enterprise. Probably that's not solved for yet into partner organization and market information. If you see as is ChatGPT knows everything in the world, but we don't want them to know my company, what's happening inside my company kind of thing. So that's where the boundaries are drawn. When we reach there, when really this reaches a way to securely extend beyond an enterprise, it will revolutionize the collaboration between client and partners, and both before, during, and after adverse events. That's specific to security aspects of the things. So secure collaboration and sharing information around adverse events are areas that need a lot of help to face the current day challenges of information security. Another area of risk that could benefit from generative AI is the ability to traverse the ecosystem for preventative information about financial, security, environmental, and social risks that third parties bring for an enterprise. I think we are talking about few years to get there. The security boundaries, how we want to protect, every enterprise want to protect, and then how this generative AI can really go from one enterprise to the other enterprise and then make the whole ecosystem securely interact and collaborate. That's something to be seen, but that's what I'm expecting.
Thanks. I mean, I'd just like to add that, and risk management is going to be truly revolutionized by AI, because if you think about it, when you're onboarding suppliers or prospective suppliers, there's a lot of content that you have to consume. Not only do you have to know about the suppliers, but you have to know about their suppliers, that means the fourth parties or the fifth parties. You need to know about the owners. Are the owners sanctioned in any way? Are the directors sanctioned of any of the entities? So you need to know about the affiliates. So there's a vast quantity of information which you need to know, but it's often not available very easily. And I think AI is going to change a lot of that, because you can actually scan a lot of information and figure out networks and dependencies. And the other part of it is, so beyond sanction screening, I would say that suppliers provide a lot of data as part of the due diligence. So they provide policies, they provide procedures, they provide certificates. Typically, these teams are very small in sourcing organizations. Someone has to go through vast quantities of data without being experts in all of those areas. And I think where AI can help is it can rate the evidence provided. Are the dates correct? Right? Is a certification for the current year or is it a previous year certification? Like an HR policy. Does it have anything to do with it? Does it even mention ethics? Does it mention anti-bribery? Does it mention discrimination? Right? So someone may have provided you a HR policy, but how do you know it's a good HR policy which is aligned with your own HR policy? Mm-hmm. And unless you do that kind of processing of content, you can't really answer that question. So that's the area with like we're investing in, is rating artifacts supplied as part of the risk due diligence, and then highlighting the areas that are missing. Right. So if you expected a HR policy to cover these 5 areas and out of them 3 of them are missing, that's a risk. It's a risk that you can then discuss with the supplier and get addressed. So great question, Ruhi.
Thanks for sharing, Nipun. I'd like to move on at this time to answer some of the questions in the chat. We had one question from an attendee come up. How will AI help manage and monitor contractual obligations? Emin, if you'd like to start with that.
All right. So the reading, understanding, cataloging, following up, ensuring compliance are all challenges with the state of the art in vendor management when it comes to contractual obligations. With many contracts, MSAs, SOWs, work orders, task orders, whatnot, with multiple vendors, it's very, very difficult. Like Nipun was mentioning, reading all of them, understanding and cataloging what are the obligations. A generative AI has very high potential in making a huge impact in this area. Contracts are negotiated so well, but not many of the obligations from either side are followed through or complied with. Key volumes and performances, SLAs, are generally taken care. But if there's a moderately mature vendor management in place, it will be almost impossible to follow through all the obligations. Generative AI could greatly enhance the vendor managers in this area. Like Nipun was talking about, cataloging and following up also, not only cataloging the obligations, but also I think some cataloging aspects already, I know ENLIGHTA has it, and following up also is it. It's more like how would you bring the right ones to the attention of the vendor managers and the right time. So, that's where the intelligence is. That's where I'm thinking this artificial intelligence could help vendor managers, again, moving towards that super vendor manager.
And I think just to expand on that, and again, I think it's like the ability to track the key obligations in the contract is critical. We were working with a client that did not have a tool or a platform. Then they ended up implementing, and basically they had a $750,000 tech fund to use by the end of the year. And the way they had interpreted the contract, they thought they needed to inform the supplier by 12/1. And in reality, there was a comma and some 30-day reference that they actually needed to do it 30 days prior. That was picked up by the platform and by the tool, and being able to look at that and in essence getting it right. And so in this example, the client almost lost the $750,000 tech fund, which they probably would have been able to extend. But as you know, in governance and relationship management, the trust and transparency between a supplier and a client can sometimes get broken down. It's a little bit of trading horses. So the ability to actually know what's in your contract through a decomposition or a simple contract plain language guide, and again, using a platform like ENLIGHTA to be able to highlight the interpretation of some of the words in the contract to enhance the vendor managers, the contract managers, so they don't get stuck in a situation where they could have almost either lost the 750,000 or at least had to trade horses to get it back. And that's not a good situation to be in when all the technology is there.
Well, it's a great point, Mark. And I'll just add to that if you look at a contract and just scan for the vendor must do, or is it required to do, or shall, do the following, you'll find there's a lot of expectations, right? Those expectations remain buried in contracts, right? And obviously they were negotiated and they were argued about, and it was done so that there's value to the business. And I think a lot of the value is not realized. And I think tools like ENLIGHTA, AI can basically extract that information, make it, automate it. Then beyond that, also when suppliers do provide that information. So let's say your critical supplier was supposed to provide a BCDR, the latest BCDR test results. Who actually opens that and checks what the results were, right? Did they cover all the areas of the business? Did it pass or fail, and what was tested? So again, the content analysis is something which AI can do well. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome, Nipun. I had another question come in from an attendee. Should clients build out their own AI capabilities or wait for tools or solutions to build in AI-enabled functions?
Maybe I can tackle that one first. So our own experience is that we were early adopters of ChatGPT, and we are now beta testing Bard. These APIs are all in their infancy, and the vendors, the platform vendors, clearly indicate that these can change, and these will change. These systems are themselves in beta mode. So I would suggest to enterprises that most of your key solution providers over time are going to figure out where all of AI can make a difference. They should be doing that, right? The good ones, and then let them do that. And then, actually, interestingly, I had lunch just a few days back with the CTO of a service provider, a large service provider, and they're out there. They have, like in this case, the provider provided a lot of contact center services, back office processing services, and they're looking at AI and saying, well, how can we improve efficiencies? How can we increase our margins? Do we really need to have staff doing this, or can AI do some of these things? So I would say that's where, from a client perspective, it's a bit too early for them to start building out their own capabilities, because it's relatively new, the APIs and the platforms. But it's certainly good to articulate use cases or scenarios where there could be potential savings, where people are struggling with a lot of manual, content analysis. I think that's where things are.
I think to follow on with that, I think it's a combination of speed, risk, and value. Mm-hmm. And so each situation is always going to be different. Right. The ability to leverage technology yourself versus buying it in more of a platform that's probably been tested for X number of years, they're able to provide the foundation for some of the new technologies that are coming out. And for some of the large contracts that we're looking at, getting it right and getting it right quickly is the benefit of $100,000 or $1 million or several $1 million in some instances for these very large supplier contracts or these captives that are getting set up. And so again, what I would say is, you probably look at it both ways, right? Run the scenario, take the balance of speed, risk, and value, and make a determination. If you want to get the savings earlier, then maybe buy a platform now. If you have some time and you want to make some investments, then maybe look at it that way. But take some diligence and do some diligence up front to be able to make that decision.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah. Just to add to what Nipun and Mark said, I think while there is a lot of buzz around it in the marketplace, there's a lot of, I would say, FUD, I call it as acronym, fear, uncertainty, and doubt internally in the enterprise. What happens? What happens with this being there? What happens to my function? What happens to me as a role? And then what happens to what I can bring to, My advice is to be proactive and look out constantly for developments in the technology. And BMO specifically should develop a point of view and a strategy for adapting and adapting this human-centric and human-enabling technology to deliver high value faster to your stakeholders. Vendor managers should not see this as a threat. They should rather see this as a great opportunity to become the so-called super vendor managers with these intelligent assistants. And it's a huge change management, but I think you should start leading it. You should be the change manager as vendor manager. Generative AI will revolutionize the way that we do vendor management and bring both enterprises and partners closer to create higher value. That's how I see it.
That's great. Well, I was going to ask, if there's any last piece of advice for our enterprise customers, or if there's any call to action for enterprises, what would it be?
I think I covered a little bit in my in response to the previous question. I think the key is the change management. Key is learning what is happening and then also adapting. That's what I would advise. Take out the FUD aspects of it. Fear, uncertainty, doubt, and then adapt it. Embrace it. That's my advice.
I'll definitely.
Well, I'll kind of add to that. That I'll just say that I guess a couple of takeaways from my perspective would be figure out the use cases internally. If it's a large contract that could benefit from this, if it's contact services, if it's vendor governance, some specific areas where you're struggling with. I'll give you an example. One of our clients has a reasonably large team in Bangalore. All they do is they extract data from contracts like suppliers and key dates and obligations and now they've been doing it for a while, and now this team can be made much more efficient with the use of AI, because first of all, you don't need that large of a team, and second, the team produces error. So not only you have a team, but you have quality issues in what was extracted. And I think, and of course, they don't work 24/7. So I think through automation, through AI, a lot of things that are being done, more mundane things which are being done with unstructured content can be done through these AI systems. So that's one thing, and every enterprise can look at where they are spending time and money in doing such mundane things and figure out whether it makes sense to do a pilot or to engage with advisors such as Mark, and figure out those use cases. And then the second part would be possibly consider platforms that already are invested in this, right? That not only are doing this today, but also have this strongly on their roadmap. Like ENLIGHTA, ENLIGHTA is a platform that currently does a lot of these functions. There are other platforms out there, and those would be my kind of two takeaways. Mark, anything you want?
Yeah, I think just to wrap up on my side, I think make it a value-based discussion. You're leaving up to 10 to 15% of the ACV, the annual contract value, by not having great governance and not setting it up the way that we talked about. Maybe use technology proactively. So don't be afraid of technology. Use it as an enabler to be able to be an unbiased service of record, and then you can manage with metrics. Get executive commitment. Make sure that the executives will be on your side when you go through the journey. Obviously, if you've got a solid business case, if a company spends $100 million in ACV, annual contract value, and they can save up to 10%, there's quite a few dollars at stake. And then communication and change management to ensure that the transparency and trust that you have with your internal stakeholders, with the executives that you made the commitments to, between the supplier and the client themselves, being able to have the discussions based on facts as opposed to emotions. So those 4 or 5 things, as I think about, what would I do if I were in your shoes and I've been in your shoes, those are the things that I would build out and do it rapidly. Otherwise, you're leaving dollars on the table.
That was a good insight, and to all the panelists, that's awesome information. Thank you for sharing that today. Just to wrap it up, if there's anything else that you all would like to say, otherwise, I'll leave the floor open. Actually, do our panelists have any last words for our audience?
I think it's been a great discussion. Being in the panel along with Mark and Nipun and you have been great. A lot of good questions. Appreciate the time that the audience have for us to listening to this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you'd like to reach out to our panelists, you can reach out to them on LinkedIn. But thank you all for attending, and hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.